Discover the amazing true story of the black hero who surprised the Ku Klux Klan in 1871. Isaac Thompson stepped off the train and felt the weight of history hanging heavy in the air. The familiar scent of Southern earth mixed with the oppressive humidity clung to him, tightening around his chest like a vice. A 30-year-old African-American educator returning from a prestigious university, he was filled with hope yet burdened by the legacy of his ancestors. His own grandmother had once been a slave. As he approached the crumbling schoolhouse, now a mere shadow of its former glory, he could almost envision vibrant classrooms buzzing with laughter and learning. His heart quickened, but the reality felt hostile. The town he remembered was fracturing under rising tensions. He gazed at the dilapidated walls, etched with forgotten dreams. The old guard governing the town dismissed his qualifications, belittling his potential in a world that seemed hell-bent on denying him his rightful place. Each step towards the schoolhouse felt like an act of rebellion, yet Isaac's resolve deepened under the gaze of history. A history etched in every wrinkle of his grandmother's hands. With each visit to her home, surrounded by the comforting aroma of her cooking, his spirit nestled deeper into resilience. Yet as the sun set low over the horizon, unease danced in his gut, whispering fears of rejection and hostility. The atmosphere grew bleak as he faced the first public meeting. Isaac's heart pounded like war drums. Rhetoric spewed towards him like poison from the mouths of men who saw him as a threat. Each word, every hateful glare, sank into him like a dagger. Their refusal to accept a black educator resounded in the depths of his soul. He practiced in the quiet corners of his room at night, honing speeches under the pale light of the moon. In the stillness, he wrestled with his fears and ambitions. Did he truly have the power to change minds steeped in hatred? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. That fateful day came closer with every ticking moment. With the Klan's rally looming over him like a dark cloud, Isaac stood in the town square, tension wrapping around him like a noose. His heart raced. He was terrified yet resolved to stand up against them. The fear of intimidation pulsed beneath his skin. As the Klan leaders prepared to speak, he could feel the weight of his lineage pressing against his shoulders. He could not falter. Each breath tasted bitter. Doubt clawed at the edges of his mind. But within this chaos, he sensed a flicker of potential. He stepped forward, the crowd before him a sea of hostility and anger. Then his voice broke through the din, a declaration fueled by the echoes of ancestors who faced insurmountable odds. Isaac felt a surge of vulnerability in that moment, a reflection of humanity that pierced the walls of conviction surrounding those he addressed. Yet, as the stirring words fell from his lips, the atmosphere thickened with tension. Would his message resonate against the steadfastness of hatred, or would it ignite a storm? His mind raced with fear. What if this fragile moment could not withstand the bitter reality closing in on him? Doubt tangled with a glimmer of hope, leaving him standing at the edge of a precipice, questions and dread swirling like a tempest around him. Isaac's words hung in the air like smoke, an audacious challenge to the taunts that cascaded from the backs of the crowd. He could see it in their eyes, some smoldering with rage, others flickering with uncertainty. The cacophony of shouts and jeers pressed against him, their disdain a tangible force he felt bearing down on his chest. He couldn't retreat, though. The pulse of his heart promised that he stood against something greater than merely a local rally. In that moment, he was the embodiment of hope, a vessel for his ancestors' dreams and struggles. Yet, with each jest and slur hurled at him, a visceral doubt twisted within. Were his optimistic intentions merely a mirage in a desert of bigotry? He inhaled deeply, desperate for a release, and allowed the suffocating atmosphere to shape his commitment. This was his fight, not just for acceptance, but for dignity against those who sought to strip it away. From the corner of his eye, a flicker of movement caught his attention. A woman in the crowd watched intently, her brow furrowed with contemplation. Isaac seized the moment. Who was she? A supporter, or perhaps another skeptic? The uncertainty sharpened his focus. He redirected his voice towards her. Every person deserves an opportunity to learn, to grow. We are not here to take anything from you. We aspire to share knowledge and cultivate a better future for all. Surging confidence colored his tone, transforming fear into fervor. The crowd stuttered, caught off guard by his unwavering stance. As he spoke, remnants of hope began to crystallize, yet the stakes never felt higher. The Klan's chants softened momentarily, their faces twitching with confusion at his contrast to the status quo. Did they expect fear, a retreat? Isaac's rising conviction mitigated their venomous rhetoric, if only just, bringing glimmers of humanity into sharp relief amidst tension. He glanced at the woman again, silently rooting for him. That moment, an electric acknowledgement surged through him, a shared understanding that transcended racial boundaries. If he could ignite even a spark of empathy, perhaps hearts could bend, minds could shift. What could be accomplished? His upbringing and education were his arsenal. He was ready to dismantle their ignorance with wisdom and courage. But the thought of failure loomed large. Was it enough to challenge years of ingrained hatred? Was he prepared to face violence, rejection, or worse from those determined to uphold the status quo? Unplugging the self-doubt that had entrapped him during the nights of restlessness felt like an act of rebellion. He clenched his fists and channeled their fierce anger into a battle cry for change. Then, in a defining moment, a voice erupted from the back of the crowd, a guttural accusation punctuated by aggressive laughter. "What do you know of struggle, boy? You come to us preaching strength without having faced real pain." That taunt cut through the crowd, spiraling Isaac's thoughts into chaos. Stopped short by the timing of its delivery, he felt the heartbeat of the hostility grow louder. The air thickened once more, igniting the flames of a silent war. With that single line, he found himself teetering on an emotional precipice. The ghosts of his lineage rose anew, voices urging him to confront the truth head-on. But could he unveil his own truths without exposing vulnerabilities that might be used against him? Utilizing that moment, he locked eyes with the challenger and took a breath, readying himself for this frank exchange. The time had come to face the rawness of both his emotions and his beliefs. With stakes as high as they could be, Isaac's journey of self-discovery had truly just begun. What discoveries awaited him in the face of new challenges? His breath quickened as he prepared to confront the deep-rooted prejudices that snaked through the crowd. What more would he reveal about himself, and at what cost? The challenge loomed larger than Isaac had anticipated, the taunt echoing in his mind as if it were an insistent gavel striking down judgment. He stepped forward, feeling the constricting heat of the crowd around him just as he felt their seeping skepticism. Was he truly prepared to unravel the threads of his own identity in this moment? "All struggle is valid," he replied, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. "But I stand here not to compare our pain, but to show that we can build bridges out of our scars." He could sense the ire still simmering in the crowd, but he brandished his words like a sword, each syllable a calculated move. The question was no longer just about his beliefs. It was about the energy he could foster, about how far he could stretch those brittle threads into something more. As he spoke, he noticed the woman watching him intently. Her expression seemed to flip between contemplation and disbelief. Did she realize he wasn't merely performing? This was his truth, intertwined with his fight for dignity. Yet, was he truly ready to expose the vulnerabilities locked deep within? Isaac recalled family stories, whispers of struggles, suffered silently, and painful histories buried beneath dreams deferred. The flickering tension within him hesitated. Was it villainy or vulnerability that made one's journey profound? The hostility in the crowd continued to ebb and flow around him. "What do you actually know about pain?" The voice rang out again, emboldened by a momentary hesitance in Isaac's gaze. It was a calculated assault. That question had been rehearsed 1,000 times in the mind of any skeptic. Isaac thought about it, circling the idea, testing its weight against his own experiences. Who was defined by their pain? Determined, he faced the accuser. "Pain," Isaac declared, letting the word roll out with purpose like a drumbeat, "exists in many forms. Some wear it physically, others conceal it behind the facade of strength and smiles. I have felt the ache of exclusion and the nagging rustle of doubt simmer in my chest." With each revelation, a flicker of daring optimism twisted through him. There was power in vulnerability. It allowed a different kind of connection, one that flourished in shared humanity, even in the most hostile terrains. His gaze shifted back to the woman, her expression deepening with understanding. Maybe she was beginning to see the raw truth that he could wield as a weapon against apathy and hatred. In that fleeting moment of clarity, Isaac recognized an emerging competency, the capacity to articulate his pain, not as a weakness, but as a strength. It was a muscle he never knew he had, one that could send ripples through the chaos. The audience seemed caught off guard by his shift in narrative. Faces shifted from mere spectators to shards of reflection, expressions caught between skepticism and dawning comprehension. "Instead of building walls, let us dismantle those that divide us," he continued, his voice steadying as courage surged. "Understanding begins with empathy, and empathy unravels hate." Lessening tension opened a door in Isaac, and he felt it. This was the moment for connection. Confidence simmered just beneath the surface, ready to burst forth. Yet deep down, the gnawing doubt still lurked. Would this moment lead him closer to defeating their ignorance, or was it simply a brief respite before the storm returned? The stakes were still perilously high. Before he could absorb that uncertainty, the same voice split the air again, louder than before. "You think you can just talk to us?" the challenger sneered. "What makes you think we're willing to change?" The crowd shifted slightly, sensing a new wave of tension materializing. Isaac inhaled deeply, drawing strength from his roots in history as he prepared for a deeper confrontation. The challenge was becoming a rightful test of not just his words, but his very essence. Could he truly change minds today, or would he need to evolve beyond mere dialogue? With each heartbeat, he realized that the answers he sought resided somewhere within, just waiting to be uncovered. What would he discover about his own strength as he faced the wave of rejection threatening suddenly? To crash around him? The thought anchored him, igniting his resolve amidst the brewing storm. Isaac was ready to confront the multifaceted trial before him, where pain, understanding, and identity all hung in the balance. What raw revelations lay ahead as he excavated deeper layers of his very being? The atmosphere was electric, tension pulsating like a heartbeat as Isaac wrestled with the anger swelling around him. Words were his only armor, but would they be enough? He stood there, his pulse quickening, acutely aware of the woman's gaze, searching for answers, perhaps searching for hope amidst chaos. "You ask what makes me think you're willing to change," Isaac returned, his tone more contemplative than combative. But what I really ask is, what makes you willing to stay the same? The question hung in the air, laden with an intensity that shifted the dynamic, drawing subtle gasps from startled faces. He felt the mounting curiosity, a sliver of acknowledgement creeping in as doubt gnawed at their stubbornness. His mind raced. Would he be able to push through, or was he merely igniting flames that would burn even brighter? Each response he poured out felt reckless yet empowering. A quiet voice whispered to him that every accusation and sneer was also an opportunity, an invitation to challenge norms and transcend boundaries. "I stand here shattered and whole," he continued, unwavering in his stance. "I speak not as an expert, but as someone who has carried his fragments through life. In every crack of despair, a light has found its way in." He noticed the flicker of comprehension light up the faces around him, wavering skepticism transforming into cautious curiosity. The woman's brow furrowed in deep contemplation, and he wondered if she reflected on her own past. Had she faced her own trials of acceptance or indifference? In an instant, that shared humanity could ignite personal connections, bridging their differences with an understanding born from struggle. But just as the wave of encouragement built, the challenger surged once more. Change is nice in theory, but what does it mean in practice? Determination fueled Isaac's response, each word sculpted from a place of lived experience rather than abstract ideas. "The truth is, we are all masters of our own fates," he stated, voice gaining momentum. "It starts with a willingness to recognize our own biases, to confront them head-on. We must be willing to expose the uncomfortable truths lurking in our own hearts." Although he could feel the undertow of doubt still threatening, an ember of resolve blazed fiercely within him, urging him to push the envelope even further. What unfolded felt like a reckoning. With every question he navigated, he was peeling back layers of defensiveness, revealing people he had assumed were entirely opposed to his journey. Every nod of agreement, every subtle shift in expression felt like a thread drawn taut, pulling the tapestry of their experience closer together. Isaac glanced at the woman once more, now leaning forward, completely absorbed. Her urgency spoke volumes to him, the need to bridge a gap, to seek out truth. It rattled him, but thrilled him, as he understood at that moment that he was awakening something within her that mirrored his own aspirations. Encouragement surged through him as he glanced over his shoulder at the onlookers. The space crackled with the hints of a community unsettling itself in search of deeper understanding. But lingering in the depths of his psyche was the realization that this engagement was only the beginning. Each connection forged today could just as easily be snuffed out by ignorance tomorrow. As the crowd simmered with contemplative murmurs, he braced himself for a deeper engagement, determined to guide this newfound curiosity toward personal reflection. Could he truly nurture this spark of connection into meaningful change? Let us not only speak of change, but commit to it. Let's promise to listen, to question what we hold true, Isaac declared, his voice resonating with urgency. And together, let's transform these wounds into wisdom. The crowd shifted again, anticipation crackling in the air as they wrestled with the shadows of their past convictions. Isaac felt the palpable tension as he prepared to immerse himself further into the confrontation ahead, to confront not only skepticism, but more importantly, his own growing fears. What deeper revelations lay ahead as he unearthed the echoes of his own misgivings? Would he find allies among the challengers, or unravel the threads of hope he had begun to weave? One thing was certain, the next moments would define how he faced tomorrow. Isaac's words rippled through the gathering, but beneath the outward commotion, an internal storm brewed. Each heartbeat echoed doubt, and his resolve flickered like a candle caught in a breeze. In this precarious balance between hope and fear, he faced a daunting truth. Was he willing to anchor his identity in the powerful resolve he was preaching? He felt the eyes upon him, scrutinizing and yearning, shifting his focus inward. Was he merely playing a role, or was there a deeper truth waiting to be illuminated? The tension wrapped around him like a shroud. He had to confront not just the skepticism of those in front of him, but his own feelings of inadequacy that surged like an undercurrent, competing with his burgeoning determination. Gradually, he began to turn the examination toward himself. He recalled his own journey, each misstep a raw reminder of the bias and denial he had grappled with personally. Could he inspire in others the same transformative acknowledgement of their biases that he had fought for in himself? He contemplated this as he steered the dialogue with newfound intention. The atmosphere was ripe for revelation. He could feel it in the air. "Let's speak candidly," he urged, inviting vulnerability. "What are our truths that we rear behind our defenses?" The question was met with silence, broken only by the shifting of chairs and a clearing of throats. They were deliberate moments, but Isaac felt them as progressive strides toward introspection. He spotlighted a young man whose arms were crossed tightly, guarding against engagement. "What do you fear most when you think of changing?" Isaac asked. And the young man looked up, visibly startled by the directness. The gathering leaned in, eager to hear the response. The tension shifted, thickening with anticipation. "I fear being wrong. I fear losing." His voice faltered before the crowd, a visible vulnerability surfacing. "I fear losing my friends." The honesty struck Isaac like a wake-up call. It was a reflection of a universal experience, the fear of alienation for the sake of growth. In that moment, he realized these confessions united them in their struggles, a realization he desperately needed. It was not just about him leading the discussion, but igniting a collective introspection. Isaac smiled genuinely. We've all been there, haven't we? Stuck at the crossroads of what we know and what we could become. The fear of being wrong often blinds us to the power of possibility. His conviction solidified as the room buzzed slightly with nods of understanding. Each person's defense began crumbling, a collective recognition that change did not mean abandoning their pasts, but rather reshaping them into lessons learned. An awakening unfolded, vibrant and palpable, like a wave gaining momentum. In daring to embrace vulnerability, Isaac was not only addressing the others, but also deepening his processes of self-awareness and growth. Shoulders that had once been tense began to relax, openness flickering in the eyes that had previously held skepticism. Encouragement blossomed around him as he dared to shift the narrative. Then came another voice, resonant and firm. "What if we change, but what then?" An older woman questioned, challenging the flickering hope that had ignited. "We want to change, but it feels so uncertain. Change can be dangerous." Isaac felt a pulse racing through him at the realization of this powerful point. Change, indeed, was daunting. It demanded a complete re-examination of ideals, relationships, and beliefs. But this was the essence of the journey, the willingness to challenge one's convictions, to prepare for a discomfort that catalyzed evolution. Change is chaotic, he asserted, allowing the thought space to breathe. But the chaos can lead to clarity, and clarity reveals strength. His heart pounded as he raised his voice, resolving to navigate through the fear he felt in this very moment. The energy surged around them, conveying the idea that they could indeed transform together, acknowledging the unpredictable waters ahead as a part of the process. The cracks in their defenses widened, and the conversation veered toward empathy and shared experiences that defined their human connection. Isaac leaned into this space, ready to embrace the danger that could accompany transformation. He took a deep breath and steeled himself for what lay ahead, aware that every moment brought him closer to their collective reckoning. But before he could chart the new course before them, he sensed an undercurrent, an unresolved tension in the atmosphere, an unfamiliar voice lurking in the shadows. Was it a whisper of dissent, or simply a challenge yet to vocalized? He could feel the pulse of uncertainty tightening around them. With a steady gaze, he prepared himself to delve even deeper, to confront whatever glimpses of resistance were threatening to surface. The time had come. Would he fortify his resolve or crack under pressure? What awaited them when the darkness revealed itself? Isaac steadied his breath, pulling the weight of attention back onto himself. The tension was tangible, a mix of anticipation and anxiety swirling in the room. He sensed that confronting the undercurrents of doubt was vital, not just for him, but for everyone present. His own hesitance echoed in the collective heart of the gathering, propelling him toward a greater clarity. Who here feels they're fighting against something deeper within? He asked, his voice unwavering yet approachable. It was a guiding question, one meant not to expose but to liberate. He saw faces drop in contemplation, a shift where vulnerability met courage like an unexpected embrace. A woman, her brow furrowed, raised her hand. "I feel torn between loyalty to my friends and the need to embrace a different perspective. If I change, will they still accept me?" Isaac nodded, recognizing echoes of his own struggles. The personal reconciling between loyalty and growth was a delicate dance. You're not alone. Each of us has a past that anchors us, yet the future is a canvas that awaits our brush, he remarked thoughtfully, looking into her eyes. What if you could share that evolution with them? Open a dialogue instead of letting fear dictate your choices. Her apprehension shifted visibly, revealing interest in broaching the complexities of growth with those she cared about. The atmosphere began to lighten, sparking an energy rich with potential. Could their dialogues forge stronger relationships through honesty rather than isolation? Yet an unsettling presence was still felt in the shadows. Isaac searched for that voice of dissent. Why was it lingering? It indicated something that needed direct confrontation. He turned slightly, scanning the room with intent. Is there anyone here who feels that change would jeopardize your sense of belonging? Speak freely. A tall figure stood at the back, arms crossed defiantly. It's easy to talk about embracing change when you're not risking your circle. You can say all this, but it sounds like empty rhetoric, he declared, challenging the collective pulse. Isaac took a deliberate step forward, inviting deeper engagement from this challenging force. No one is suggesting that change is without risk, my friend, but avoiding growth for fear of alienation only marries us to stagnation. I felt torn between past expectations and future aspirations. It's a struggle everyone faces at some point. The man hesitated, visibly wrestling with the rawness of those words. Isaac sensed an opportunity here, a moment that could reshape their interaction. What if we honor ourselves through the uncertainty? Begin with curiosity instead of judgment. This ignited another exchange among the attendees, whispers of agreement and dissent, rising like waves. It was clear now that the struggle was much more than personal. It was a shared human experience. There was fear, yes, but beneath it thrived an unquenchable need for growth, a universal yearning to step into the unknown. Isaac focused on integrating that energy into the dialogue, weaving personal anecdotes of his own failures and fears, emphasizing that true evolution was often born from discomfort. He imparted stories of those who had navigated similar depths and emerged transformed, but not unscathed. Revelation pushed through like light breaking through a storm. Yet, without warning, the room quieted as the earlier question resurfaced. What would it truly mean if they chose to embrace change? It loomed heavy above them, a potent catalyst that could just as easily lead to failure as fulfillment. Strikingly, there was no clear answer in the air. only the desperate need to confront the shadows that loomed over their decisions. Isaac sensed the culmination of their introspection brewing, each revelation a step closer to a collective awakening. He raised the stakes, having recognized how he too was on this precarious tightrope between fear and resolve. We stand at a threshold of decision. The question is clear. Are we bold enough to step forward despite the uncertainties? He felt the weight of their gazes, now a curious blend of trepidation and resolve. The task was not just to inspire, but to ignite, a bold call to face the fears that lay ahead. In this charged moment, he recognized that what stretched out before them was not just a possibility, but an imperative. They were not only confronting their own challenges, but also redefining who they were destined to become. What choices would they make when they caught sight of their shadows reflecting back at them? Once again, he braced himself for whatever voices of dissent would linger in the air. One question arose. Was he genuinely prepared to challenge his own shadows, or would they hold him back when the reckoning was due? The contours of change were looming, but so was the threat of retreat. Isaac surveyed the room, absorbing the weight of the moment. The challenge posed by the tall man still hovered in the air, a specter of doubt refusing to relent. Isaac realized he was not merely facilitating a session. He was immersed in a potent dialogue that converged on his own fears. As the murmurs of uncertainty faded, he felt the gravitational pull of his own internal reflection. Could the doubts threatening to engulf him in retreat be transformed into a source of empowerment? The prospect both thrilled and terrified him. In so doing, he advanced deeper into the heart of the matter. "Let's break it down together," he proposed, his words gathering momentum. "What are the very real fears you envision associated with change?" Another participant, a man with a furrowed brow and hesitant posture, spoke up. "What if we change, and it's not what we hoped for? What if we're left even more alone?"
"Change is uncertain," Isaac affirmed, sensing the precariousness of their collective vulnerability. "But remaining stagnant holds its own kind of loneliness, doesn't it? Wouldn't you rather face the unknown together rather than endure the familiar, knowing it no longer serves you?" He felt a flicker of tension ease amongst the group. Their walls were not impenetrable. They were simply fortified by fear and mistrust. Isaac seized the opportunity to share a personal anecdote, his own stumbles in navigating change. He provided a raw glimpse of a time when he had stepped away from a familiar path only to encounter newfound allies. "Each time I embraced a shift, I found pieces of myself I hadn't known existed. Each risk opened doors to experiences I didn't know I craved." The faces in the room reflected the flickers of recognition and intrigue. Little by little, he could see the gears of introspection turning, fears giving way to a spark of curiosity. Isaac felt an urge to push further, to go beyond mere reflection into a space of action. What's one small step each of you can take this week that will move you closer to something new? Make it tangible. Making change shouldn't only exist in your thoughts. There was silence. Then, slowly, the air filled with tentative declarations. A woman expressed her desire to confront her limiting belief about pursuing art. Another wished to initiate a difficult conversation with her friends. Isaac listened, encouraging each participant's journey as it unfolded, witnessing their latent potential emerge from the shadows of self-doubt. In this transformative moment, Isaac felt an unsettling pang within himself. Why was he so driven to support their awakening? Hadn't he been grappling for guidance in his own journey? As the group began to formulate their small steps, Isaac could no longer suppress his own desire for resolution. He took a deep breath, feeling the gravity of his own journey pressing upon him. As you all reflect on your next steps, I must also ask myself, what am I willing to risk in embracing my evolution? Am I prepared to confront the shadows of my past that hold me back? His proclamation hung in the air, a palpable tension woven among the attendees as they absorbed their leader's introspection. The spotlight had shifted. Their shared willingness to embark on a new journey compelled Isaac to lay bare his own vulnerabilities. He recognized then that mentoring others had illuminated his path. Perhaps, inadvertently, he was steering himself towards his own breakthrough. But there remained an unsettling gap. Would he find the courage to forge ahead amidst his lingering uncertainties? He left the session energized, yet aware of the demanding reckoning ahead. In the energy of promise, unease stirred within him. The anticipation of self-discovery beckoned, but threatened to unravel his carefully constructed facade. The question loomed larger than ever. Would he honor the journey toward his true self, or would he surrender to the confines of his past? It was no longer merely about guiding
others. He was also on the precipice of his own revelation. As he stood on the brink of this newfound clarity, he could hear whispers of the unresolved shadows beckoning him. The journey had only just begun. Would he embrace the discomfort of his own metamorphosis, or would he allow fear to sweep him into stagnation once more? The echoes of his own heartbeats danced in his ears, each one a reminder that change was not simply a collective endeavor. It was an individual challenge calling him to its threshold. Isaac stepped out into the cool night air, his mind awhirl with the gravity of what he had just revealed. His vulnerability hung around him like an invisible cloak, both empowering and suffocating. The certainty that he had urged others to explore their fears was now beckoning him to confront his own. He couldn't ignore the gnawing realization that leading by example meant tearing down the very walls he had constructed to shield himself from vulnerability. As he walked down the dimly lit street, he pondered the faces he had seen, the budding courage sprouting there. Yet he wondered what tool he could wield to dismantle his latent insecurities. Change required an action plan, not merely introspection. What has driven me so far? The question echoed in his thoughts, a haunting refrain as he plotted a course back to his apartment. He envisioned the structure of each session, the ebb and flow of dialogue that awakened something deep within him. That realization, his need to push boundaries not just for others, but for himself, marked the pivotal shift he desperately needed. Upon reaching his apartment, he sank into his armchair, its familiar contours feeling both welcoming and confining. The walls seemed to close in, and he rated the potential avenues open before him. Confronting his fears loomed as a daunting task. What if he explored uncharted territory? What if he encountered a truth he wasn't prepared to face? With resolution building within him, he grabbed a notebook from the side table. Flipping to a blank page, he began to scribble a list of worries, each more personal than the last. They had nagged at him in quiet moments, but now screamed for acknowledgement. He wrote about his fear of inadequacy, of being judged for not having all the answers, and the deeply rooted doubt about his ability to inspire real change, not just in others, but particularly in himself. As the ink soaked into the paper, Isaac experienced a catharsis. He felt a burden lighten with each worry listed. This was his first tangible step. Standing naked before his fears in this deliberate act of acknowledgement struck him as both liberating and terrifying. With every item penned, he mapped an action to counter each fear. Addressing that nagging sense of inadequacy could be tackled by seeking further training. He'd join a workshop on leadership. The judgment he felt could be combated by initiating open dialogues about vulnerability, both within and outside his sessions. He jotted down the idea of reaching out to peers for feedback, understanding that collaboration might expose his blind spots without diminishing his worth. He paused, fingers hovering over the page, and a small wave of anxiety threatened to break over him again. Each action was a risk, a commitment to hold himself accountable. But there was a flicker of eagerness too, a hint of anticipation that spurred him on. As Isaac closed his notebook, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the window, a figure crossing an infinite expanse of uncertainty toward growth.
It felt like more than mere motivation. It was an invitation to step fully into who he could be, balancing the reckless abandon of exploration with the steady pulse of possibility. Yet the shadow of the tall man from the session returned unbidden, embodying his inner critic. The words spoken during the session replayed in his mind, and with them the weight of what lay ahead settled in his chest. Would he allow that specter to hold him back, or could he find the strength to pierce through the darkness, embracing the uncomfortable, embracing himself? The resolution crystallized within him. Tomorrow he would reach out to the training coordinators. He would initiate a dialogue with the stakes far more elevated than before. The question lingered. Would he rise to the challenge of not only claiming his own potential, but proving that fear could indeed become fuel? Each heartbeat became a drum urging him forward, urging him to face not only the path ahead, but the man reflected back at him, challenging him to evolve. Tomorrow held promise, but with it came the fierce reality of the demands he'd have to confront. And so, with a resolve newly ingrained, he closed his eyes, ready to embrace not just the journey ahead, but the daunting truth of who he might yet become. What remained was the immediate confrontation with his deepest fears. Would he have the courage to show the real Isaac, unfiltered and without pretense? Morning light filtered through the blinds, casting a soft glow that stirred Isaac from restless dreams. The vivid recollections of yesterday's revelations lingered, clinging to him like a second skin. Each decision he had penned felt weighty yet invigorating, simultaneously a promise and a test. The echo of the tall man's shadow loomed large in his mind, pushing him to act, to shatter the remnants of his complacency. With determination rising, Isaac brewed a cup of coffee, its rich aroma filling the room. He paced the small kitchen, each step igniting a meditative rhythm that nudged him toward the choices he would soon make. He thought of the workshop, his initial steps into discomfort, and the vulnerability that would require. Was he prepared to unveil his shortcomings in front of strangers? Staring out into the busy street, he glimpsed reflections of others rushing through their morning routines. Their lives seemed intertwined, yet in stark contrast to his own journey of self-discovery. Did they harbor secret fears? Isaac smiled ruefully, understanding that vulnerability transcended individual experience. Everyone bore invisible burdens. With warm coffee in hand, he settled at his desk, cracking open his notebook once more. The sight of his action plan reignited his resolve. What if he could transform his fears not only into fuel but into motivation for others as well? A flicker of excitement passed through him, punctuated by an undercurrent of anxiety. Could he truly share this journey with others, inspiring them to embrace their own vulnerabilities? The idea of starting an open forum haunted him, a space where participants could exchange their struggles. Conversations that hadn't yet occurred, explorations into shared fears, and the risk of misjudgment swirled through his mind. But this was the essence of authenticity, to expose oneself to the world, regardless of the reactions that might follow. He grabbed his phone, fingers hovering over the number of the training coordinators. Just a quick call. No, knocking on the door to opportunity. Isaac took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of each heartbeat, excitement and trepidation wrapped into one. He dialed, compelling himself to form his thoughts into coherent words, entreating the universe to respect his initiative. Hello, this is Isaac. I'd like to discuss the upcoming leadership workshop. The voice on the other line was warm but professional, and he could sense the intrigue. With every question he asked, Isaac felt a resonating shift inside him, a burgeoning confidence that compelled him to lean into his developing identity as a facilitator, a mentor. The conversation flowed faster, enthusiasm igniting with each shared idea. By the end of the call, a workshop spot was secured, an affirmation that he was stepping towards the man he wanted to be, not just the man he had been. Yet, the questions persisted. What else could he unearth about himself? As he prepared to leave for the session, he looked back at his notebook. There was more to explore, personal stories to weave into his teachings that would resonate on a deeper level. As the sun dipped low,
Painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, Isaac walked towards the community space where he would host his first session. Each passing step heightened his awareness of the weight of expectations, his own and those imposed by others. What stories would emerge from his mouth, unvarnished and raw? How would participants react when faced with their own fears mirrored through his own struggles? He took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the evening wrapping around him. It was in this delicate balance between anticipation and fear that growth resided. Would he find the courage to be fully transparent, to challenge himself and others to truly face their vulnerabilities? The crowd gathering shifted his focus. The time had come, not just to speak, but to truly show up as his authentic self, stripped of pretense and fortified by experience. What awaited him inside would test everything he had worked to build. Would he rise to the challenge? Isaac stood at the front of the assembled group. He felt the familiar nervous energy coiling in his stomach. Yet this time it was underlined by determination. He caught a glimpse of the woman from the previous gathering. A reassuring smile crossed her face. She believed in his message. The cold prick of fear had transformed into the warmth of purpose, and he was ready to embrace it. With a clear voice, Isaac addressed the participants. Today, we are going to delve into our stories, our truths. Each of us carries narratives shaped by struggles, hope, and the relentless pursuit of connection. The room buzzed with murmurs of agreement, a shared acknowledgement that they were standing at the threshold of a collective breakthrough. Unlike his past encounters filled with trepidation, he had prepared rigorously for this moment. He had mapped out personal anecdotes, woven insights from his own journey, and framed conversations around vulnerability. He deliberately chose to unveil layers of his own insecurities, the stories that had once isolated him but had now become bridges for connection. "I want to start with a piece of my own story," he began, feeling his words cradle his past while urging him forward. He spoke about the weight of expectations he felt both externally and internally, sharing how he once shied away from expressing his vulnerabilities for fear of judgment. "For so long, I wore a mask, the strong educator, but inside, I grappled with doubts that threatened to overtake me." He paused, allowing the stories of hardship to settle among the group. "Yet, it was in embracing those very struggles that I found strength, resilience, and a sense of purpose." He observed as heads nodded in understanding. Here was a moment of recognition. He was no longer just guiding. He was inviting others to embark on their own paths of introspection. Breaking into small discussion groups, he encouraged attendees to share their fears and aspirations. He interjected as he moved from one group to another, drawing connections between their narratives and emphasizing the shared human experience. "This is how we foster transformation, by contributing our unique voices to a collective chorus of growth," he said. Isaac's confidence soared with each passing moment. He felt the energy in the room shift. Vulnerability unraveled among participants. A young man expressed fear of expressing his artistic passion, while an older woman shared her struggle with vulnerability in friendships that had become stagnant. Their words resonated deeply, nestled among the embers of his own journey. As breakouts concluded, Isaac noticed the same woman who had encouraged him earlier addressing the group. "I've realized," she said, "that our fears do not define us. They can become powerful tools to connect and inspire change when shared." The room erupted in supportive applause, signaling a collective acknowledgement that vulnerability flourished seeds of empowerment. In that moment, Isaac recognized the fruits of his labor. This was not merely about him. It was a conversation expanding beyond the confines of the space and seeping into the broader fabric of their community. As the session concluded, attendees formed small circles for networking, connections sparking among them with a fervor Isaac hadn't foreseen. He felt the rush of uncontainable pride swell in his chest. He had entered this experience unsure, yet now he was clad in shielded confidence. He had not only conquered his fears, but encouraged others to embrace their own as well. Later that evening, recapping the day's sessions in solitude, Isaac reflected on how far he had come. The man who once wrestled with crippling self-doubt now stood proudly as a catalyst for change. His commitment to authenticity had not only transformed his trajectory, but created ripples of impact in those around him. As he reviewed participant feedback that showcased gratitude and a thirst for continuation, a sense of fulfillment pulsated through him. He drafted another list. While many fears had been documented, the goals lined with tangible possibilities far outnumbered them. He envisioned hosting follow-up sessions that continued fostering this atmosphere of openness and interaction. Concrete goals crystallized: mentoring other facilitators, potentially opening resources for community engagement. Transformational growth had ignited within him, and the firm belief that he could advocate for others fueled him further. In his reflection, a final thought anchored deep in his heart: how liberating it felt to confront existential doubts and emerge not merely as a survivor, but as a leader. Every layer of his vulnerability had forged a robust identity, unfiltered and ready to inspire others. He was ready to step into a role that echoed not just his dreams, but the collective dreams of many. As he closed his notebook, the lights dimmed softly around him, leaving a beautiful sense of closure about this chapter of his life. An achievement marked by transformation, connection, and an unwavering commitment to growth. Now was the moment. He was ready to embrace new opportunities, and a voice inside whispered, "You deserve this." He smiled, recognizing the power of belief as the key to unlocking genuine fulfillment. You need to subscribe now for more inspiring stories. Leave a like now to support engaging narratives that transform lives. Comment your thoughts, reactions, and predictions about Isaac's journey. Let's keep the conversation alive. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to embark on their own path of transformation.